The flickering torchlight cast ominous shadows across the crowded courtroom. It was 1620 in the town of Bamberg, part of the Holy Roman Empire, and Maria Hall knelt trembling before the council of inquisitors. Her crime? Alleged witchcraft, a charge that had turned her world into a nightmare. The witch trials in Europe marked an era of mass hysteria that spanned over 3 centuries, beginning in the early 1400s and lasting until the late 18th century. Over this period, approximately 100,000 individuals were prosecuted for witchcraft across Europe and British America, with an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 executed. The trials reached their most fevered pitch in the Holy Roman Empire, particularly in southwestern Germany, where societal tensions, economic crises, and deeply ingrained patriarchal structures coalesced into a perfect storm of fear and repression. Women bore the brunt of these persecutions, with roughly 80% of those convicted being female. Most of these women were over the age of 40, and many were widows, single women, or others marginalized by society. They were easy scapegoats for the hardships of the time, blamed for everything from crop failures and plagues to natural disasters and economic downturns. Their deviation from societal norms, be it in behavior, appearance, or independence, often sealed their fates. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, written by Heinrich Kramer and published in 1486, served as a grim manual for identifying, interrogating, and prosecuting witches. This book, endorsed by both Catholic and Protestant authorities, perpetuated the belief that women were especially susceptible to the devil's influence due to their perceived moral and spiritual weakness. It became a key tool in spreading the paranoia that fueled the witch hunts, advocating the use of torture and meticulous examinations to root out signs of witchcraft. The methods prescribed in the Malleus Maleficarum were horrifying. One of the primary identifiers of a witch was the so-called devil's mark, a scar or blemish allegedly given to a witch by the devil. Finding this mark often required invasive and humiliating physical examinations, which compounded the suffering of the accused. After 1468, when Pope Innocent VIII declared witchcraft to be crimen acceptum, a crime exempt from legal limitations on torture, the use of brutal methods to extract confessions became commonplace. Accused witches were subjected to unspeakable torments, thumbscrews, racks, and even sexual humiliation, such as forced seating on red-hot stools. The rationale was chilling: if the accused had aligned with the devil, their physical pain would prompt them to betray their pact. Often, these women, desperate for relief, confessed to crimes they did not commit, naming supposed co-conspirators in the process and perpetuating the cycle of accusations. Maria Hall's ordeal was no exception. Arrested on the flimsiest of evidence, a neighbor's failed crop and whispered rumors of strange behavior, she endured days of excruciating torture. Her interrogators sought a confession, but Maria refused to yield, her defiance an act of courage in a world that denied her humanity. During the early medieval period, mainstream Christian doctrine dismissed belief in witches and witchcraft as pagan superstition. However, the work of Dominican theologian Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century began to shift this perspective. Aquinas proposed that humans could collaborate with demons to gain supernatural powers, laying the theological foundation for the witch hunts that followed. By the 15th century, the Church's stance had evolved to view witchcraft not merely as heresy but as an existential threat requiring severe punishment. This shift created an environment where accusations required little tangible evidence. Witchcraft, by its very nature, was believed to be an invisible crime, making traditional alibis irrelevant. Witnesses could testify to a suspect's supposed motives or the effects of their alleged sorcery, and half-proofs, circumstantial evidence or hearsay, were deemed sufficient for conviction. The system was rigged against the accused, leaving them with no recourse to prove their innocence. The human cost of the witch trials is almost impossible to quantify. Beyond the staggering numbers of those executed, countless others were ostracized, dispossessed, or irreparably traumatized. The victims' personal stories are largely lost to history, overshadowed by the broader narrative of societal hysteria. Consider the fate of Margaretha, a widow from a small village in Alsace. Known locally as a healer, she had spent years aiding her neighbors with herbal remedies and midwifery. But when a sudden plague swept through the region, fingers pointed to Margaretha. Her knowledge of herbs, once valued, was now seen as evidence of dark powers. She was dragged before a tribunal, tortured until she confessed to consorting with the devil, and burned at the stake. Margaretha's story was tragically common, as women with skills or knowledge beyond the ordinary were often the first to be accused. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, the witch trials began to wane. Enlightenment ideals brought a growing skepticism of superstition and a renewed emphasis on reason and evidence. Legal reforms gradually limited the use of torture and required more rigorous standards of proof. Scholars and intellectuals began to question the existence of witches altogether, and the tide of public opinion slowly turned against the prosecutions. However, the damage had been done. Generations of women, along with some men, had been sacrificed on the altar of fear and ignorance. The witch trials left a legacy of injustice that serves as a sobering reminder of the dangers of societal scapegoating and the abuse of power. If the women persecuted during the witch trials could speak today, their voices would echo with pain and anger. They would recount lives torn apart by accusations they could neither understand nor defend against. They would tell of the cruelty they endured at the hands of neighbors, clergy, and magistrates. And they would remind us of the enduring consequences of prejudice and unchecked authority. In reflecting on this dark chapter of history, one often thinks about the societal structures and beliefs that allowed such atrocities to occur. The witch trials were not merely the product of superstition but also of deeply ingrained misogyny, economic inequality, and fear of the unknown.